Should I draft a bunch of log lines for my ideas for scripts before I write them, or is it expected that I have the scripts completed?
Personally, I like writing the log line first, because then if you start going off in some direction while writing, you can look back at your log line and go, no, that belongs in a different story, or it belongs in a different draft. The draft I'm writing right now is this one. It's this log line. Can be very useful to prevent you from just wandering off into the distance and go. French films are lovely, but those aren't selling here. So I would say just that's one way to look at it, is it's a very good sort of walking cane, or like back brace for your story, where it's just like, there you go, it's there. I've landed on this one. I know that this is the right character for this. I know that I know what the ironic element is. I know what the location is and what the villain is and what the actual obstacles are. That's very useful. But it's also boring sometimes to be stuck. And there are a lot of people who don't like to write that way. And if you don't like to write that way, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with writing a log line after the fact. It just means that it may not, you may find that your story isn't as tight and perfect at the end. Like the log line may be a little bit looser. It may not be as exciting or as commercial or whatever. So it's just, it's kind of personal. It's a personal thing. I choose to do it now because it shortcuts a lot of the work you have to do later. But it's up to you.
I'll add to that. I have all of my story farm writers write log lines before they get into the process of actually writing the project, mainly because they're able to bounce those log lines off of me, and then I talk to them about the project, and that makes a big difference, because then you can actually have a conversation. But a lot of times from a development approach, you notice the things that are missing when you just come at it from a conceptual approach. Here's my log line for now. I don't even know if this is working. Like one of my writers today sent me a long log line, which is fine. I like them long at first. And I noticed that there was really only one reference to the actual action that is taking place in the story. Everything else was kind of just goop around it. And it was just a reference of, prevent this from happening. And I'm like, okay, so that's technically what we're going to see, but how are they preventing it? In what way? Is it a unique way they're preventing it? Like, that's technically your story. And so writing the logline before the script is written makes a huge difference from a development standpoint. From a business standpoint, don't just send loglines out there without completed scripts.
Right. Because they're going to go, oh yeah, let me read this one. And you're like, ah!
Yeah. That there's a little bit of an unprofessionalism to that. Yeah.
Yeah, the goop around it was a good way of putting it, Max. I see so much, like, you hear the term promise of the premise a lot, and we see how bad that goes a lot of the times. I've done it myself, but we all do it.
Totally.
We all do it. But I do log lines and develop pitch decks first before even diving in. That helps because I don't outline, but that helps me be the outline. Just go back to what was the premise? Are we delivering on that premise? Yeah. That's a big question you should ask yourself.
I do that same thing too with the pitch deck, because it really helps me hone in on the very specific things. I mean, I always revamp it after, but we try to create some sort of visual that we can check in on, because I don't outline either. And it just kind of helps your brain get focused. If you're somebody who is all over the place, getting it down in a very simple way sometimes really helps you focus in on those themes and things that you're actually trying to.
It's a way to bounce from concept straight to scene brainstorming, because you see, oh gosh, that's what it is, a 40-year-old virgin. And now you've got all these moments and scenes that are going to show a 40-year-old virgin, and you're going from concept to scene brainstorming. You can't just come up with a basic concept and go page 1 interior. You don't even know where you're going. Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Does that limit any of your discovery of your characters, or have you worked through those so much so at that point that you're not worried about that? Or do you find yourself discovering even more and still being able to maintain that premise?
I love discovering as I go. Yeah. I love the discovery of, like, when I'm free to let my character do what they're going to do, because I kind of know their backstory and I know sort of what they're going to do, to sort of let them do it. Then we sort of uncover new things. And I'm just somebody who's always revising. I'm not somebody who writes a vomit draft because then I'll get stuck on all those things and get trapped. So I
Yeah.
have to edit as I go per act or whatever. So I like the discovery of the character, from the character, what they would do.
And do you mean from like a logline standpoint, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, you have your log line and then you're sticking to that, but then you kind of know the story you want to tell and how you want it to arc out. But sometimes I feel that there's discoveries of your character. To put it in a simple ways, I remember Al Pacino when he was shooting a film. It was like the second or third day, he realized the character needed to be, he forgot his glasses at home, and then he brought that as part of his character. Do you find little tidbits about your characters in there, and then how does that, could that take you down a rabbit hole that's like, well, that affects the story I'm trying to tell in some way?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, for sure. I think there's always this discovery process because you're still just in the concept mode of brainstorming. You're just kind of looking at what's the premise here. But a lot of times you make discoveries of, my character is more interesting and unique than the situation, or, oh, the situation is more interesting than the character. And then you focus on one more than the other, and then you have discoveries about that. But then sometimes the situation, which is really just another term for second act, informs the changes you can make in the character, or you add layers, or, ooh, if this type of character was in this type of situation, it makes it that much more. Because everybody who's seen me on the webinars are sick of me talking about 40-year-old virgin, but they could have made him an asshole and it would have been a completely different movie. But they were like, no, he's going to be the nicest person on the planet and terrified of confrontation. Like, they added all these layers so that they said, it's this type of situation I want them to be in. Because we've seen guys go on dates before, but not necessarily in this way. And it's all driven from the type of character that Steve Carell was. So there's the discovery process of figuring out what type of 40-year-old virgin do I want.
Do you like to do it yourself? I love that one. My
Put
favorite
your
part.
bike in my trunk.
I'm gonna put your bike in my trunk.